This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
This podcast is sponsored by The Forward. Stay up to date with unlimited access to news, culture, and opinion all through a Jewish lens. And for our listeners, for 2NJB listeners, get 6 months of The Forward for only $10. That's 67% off. An exclusive subscription offer for our listeners, forward.com/2NJB, and get 6 months for $10. No matter where you're from, it's hard to ignore what's going on in the United States as of May of this year. The killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer ignited massive protests and widespread riots across the country. COVID and an approaching election did nothing to calm the storm. When something this dramatic happens to Israel's most powerful ally, it's especially hard for Israelis to ignore. Unrest usually doesn't bode well for either Israel or Jews in general. Today we're with an old guest of the podcast, Ofir Dayan. Ofir studies at Columbia University in New York, and she's the head of SSI, which stands for Students Supporting Israel.
Okay. My last semester is president, but yeah.
Okay.
Just making sure.
She joins us today to talk about right in the middle of the intro. No better time.
Because when we copy-paste and then I realized,
Yeah. Okay, so she joins us today to talk about the unrest in the United States and what it all means for the people who will probably end up being blamed for causing it all, the Jews. So, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you?
Good. I just want to say it's not end up being, accused of starting it all. We already see like road signs in California, on bridges saying Jews want unrest.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's already happening. So, yeah, you can update your intro. It's already there.
Well, we're going to have to change that bit anyway because,
I ruined it.
No, it's all good. So, what's it like? I mean, what was it? You just came back. You told us about a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
What was it like there for that? I mean, that means you were there from May until middle of July?
Yeah, I came back in July. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty insane. It's apocalyptic. You go in the street and on the one hand, it's completely empty. But when it's not empty, there are mass riots outside, and not just riots, just like people marching in the streets. I've been volunteering with this Jewish organization before I came to Israel. And whenever I used to come back from their volunteering station to my apartment, I used to see like people marching down the streets with signs, obviously Black Lives Matter protests. And when I left there, it was right in the midst of it. I mean, you could just walk down the street and all of a sudden see, like 500, 600 people marching towards you, chanting and protesting. And the interesting thing is that even the bystanders are very involved in the protests. People are standing in the streets, clapping their hands. People, for example, shopkeepers would go out with bottles of water and hand out water to the protesters or, just clap, cheer them on. So the public, at least in New York, was very involved. Even in cases, for example, I witnessed a protest in Central Park. And even people who, would not be, in for a protest, families with kids on a Saturday afternoon trying, to relax, have a nice picnic, and they see 200 people chanting and screaming, even them were, they were very supportive of it. You could see that people are, telling their children, look at this protest. This is, what a model citizen should look like. So I feel like did you witness unrest as well, like riots? Because at first you said riots, but the area that I lived in Manhattan did not see much unrest. I did witness a lot of protests, but I never witnessed something violent or.
But you saw the streets getting closed up, the shops, all the viral videos we saw.
Of course. I even saw one time 600, 700 people marching together and screaming and chanting, and the roads were blocked, but never something like the images we saw of looting. Although I obviously know it happened because we saw the pictures all the time. And I heard from my window every single night, police cars and different sirens responding to the unrest. So it happened. I tried to avoid being in these places. I don't think it's the nicest thing to be witnessing people looting stores. It's not my cup of tea.
But did you feel the general situation, the safety situation in New York deteriorated?
I think it depends where you go. I think in certain areas in New York, for sure, people were scared to go to. I think that, around the major areas where they were looting and, the protests became more violent, I think people definitely avoided. I know that even, again, we didn't go out much that time because it was all also Corona. But I know that many people, really preferred to meet in certain places and not in others to avoid the protests, because in some cases they did become violent. And I think the scariest part is that you can never tell when and which of these protests is going to get violent. It could just happen, in an instant, because it really depends on how the police react to the protesters. And every little thing can, set something off.
I wonder, you said about how people are participating, cheering, but what about the people, if someone happens to, God forbid, not agree? Because I saw this viral video from tonight in Wisconsin. We're recording this 2 days after, what's the name of the African-American guy?
Jacob Blake.
Okay, so we're recording this 2 days after that incident, and there were protests overnight in Wisconsin, and I saw a video of a woman who was sitting at the bar outside a restaurant or something.
Like at a food truck or something.
I don't know, and masses of protesters surround her.
I saw that.
Violently because
screaming that silence is violence.
She wouldn't participate. She wouldn't raise her hand in support of the protest. So they were almost lynching her. It was very threatening.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I saw that video and they were screaming at her that white silence is violence. To me, that sentence is horrible.
It's violent. It's a violent sentence, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know what the fact that she's white has to do with it. Regardless, all the people who were chanting and screaming at her were also white kids. So that was pretty weird. And someone, I think it was a reporter or something, even made that comment on Twitter that all these people are, white kids who hijacked the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think that's a very important point, because I think many people generally would agree that the United States has an issue of racism. They would think it has this issue to varying degrees. I don't think everyone would agree that it's, very, very severe. But I think generally people would agree that there is an issue. You can't deny that, African Americans are being shot by police more frequent than Caucasians. But I think the protests were hijacked by people with interests that are not the interests are not necessarily the interests of the African American community in the United States. I don't think that it serves any interests of the Black community in the United States, the pictures of what you just described, or lynchings or looting. I think that if they're trying to prove that they are law-abiding citizens and they should be trusted and treated as any other citizen, I don't think looting helps that cause so much. And that's a reason that you see that a lot of these protesters are not necessarily members of the Black community. And I would just want to tie this to what I'm experiencing on Columbia's campus. In many instances, the Students for Justice in Palestine, they are not Palestinians. They are not Arabs. They are white, privileged kids who want to feel like they're doing something good for the world. So they hijack that cause because that's what's cool right now. That's the cause that, it's cool to advocate for. And I feel like the Black Lives Matter movement was kind of hijacked in the same way. But unfortunately, it's so rooted. I mean, the Black Lives Matter as a movement, not as, you know, an idea, is hijacked a long time ago. I mean, Black Lives Matter, for example, is signatory to the BDS resolution. The movement supports BDS. And I don't think it serves any interest of the Black community in the United States. I don't think if you ask, you know, the average African American trying to live their life in the US, if they support BDS, I don't think they even know what it means. Or
BD what?
Yeah, and for example, I can tell you that last year or 2 years ago on Martin Luther King weekend, I flew to Alabama and I did the Civil Rights Trail.
My home. I grew up in Alabama.
I had
Birmingham,
so
Alabama.
much fun.
It's a beautiful place.
So I did the Civil Rights Trail, and we went to to where Martin Luther King preached.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk in, and they hear you from Israel, like, and it's a Black community, and you go in, and they hear, you know, they heard I'm from Israel, and they started hugging me, and like, you're the daughter of God, and you know, you're so great, and I think
They're
that
evangelists.
I
Many
think
of them,
yeah.
Baptists.
So I think that if you go into that church and ask them, do you support BDS? Do you think it has anything to do with the Black Lives Matter movement? I highly doubt that these people would say yes.
No, most of the Southern Baptist community and evangelists are actually very strong supporters of Israel.
Right,
so.
and that's a very big portion of the Black community in the United States. That's why I think the Black Lives Matter as a movement kind of hijacked the idea of Black Lives Matter
But don't you
to
think
a way that doesn't serve the African American
community. Don't you think it says something about a movement if the hijackability of it says something about the message? Do you really think that the message of the Black Lives Matter movement resonates with the Black community?
I think to a degree it does. I think they do feel there is an issue. I do think that they want to change it. I do not think many of them, I don't know, I am not, you know, an African American myself, so I can't talk for them, but I do believe that many of them would not want to do it in such a militant way.
Mm-hmm.
They would like to, you know, be more well integrated in society. They would like to do it through, you know, something I don't necessarily agree with, but, you know, having more quotas in colleges or in workplaces.
Affirmative action.
Yeah, affirmative action. Yeah.
Do you see that on the campus at Columbia University? There's like, is there discussion around these things? Is there an open discourse, or is there a feeling of like I don't know, that you can't say certain things?
So Columbia is a very politically active campus, but mostly on one side of the political map. So there is discussion, but usually, you know, it ends up being like, yeah, I support the Black Lives Matter movement, and the other person would say, yeah, me too. And they would advocate, and they would organize, and they would go to protests together. But I don't think there are many people at Columbia who would publicly reject. Maybe the movement, yes, but not the idea. As should be. I don't think the idea of equality should be rejected.
But that's the problem,
but
right?
the problem
isn't
is
it
with
kind
the
of a cheap
movement,
trick?
not the idea.
No, but I'm saying, isn't it kind of, I mean, I don't know what the idea, because Black Lives Matter on their website is like an openly Marxist organization as well, which I don't understand
that's the issue.
The connection. But it was very early on a Marxist.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
the
idea
founders,
that African Americans shouldn't be discriminated against, that they shouldn't be.
But that's what I'm saying. It wasn't started in that way. Like
so that's what I'm saying. The problem is not the idea that African Americans in the U.S. should be treated differently. The problem is the movement that was created that is advocating for so many other causes that has nothing to do with that original
It's
cause.
a problem maybe to you as a Zionist,
right?
But apparently to them it's not a problem because they support it, right?
I don't know,
I don't understand how can you be a Zionist. I'm talking about the Jewish community.
Yeah, of course.
And also support protests that are, I don't know what hijacked means. Like, to me, either they organize it or they're deeply involved or they're not. So as supposing they are deeply involved, in the protests. So how can you support protests that are that this organization is deeply involved in, and also be a Zionist? Intellectually, it seems...
I mean, that's a very good question. I had many discussions about this issue with my friends who support Black Lives Matter, and during the time of the protests, that they were posting a lot on social media, showing support for the protests. And I talked to them about it a lot, and many of them told me, you know what, like, this is a just cause, and I need to put how I feel about Israel aside because it's irrelevant now. I deeply disagree with this. I think that if one of the biggest components of who you are is being a Zionist,
how can you put it aside?
I don't think you can put it aside. That's exactly was my argument. But for them, first of all, I think some of them, unfortunately, are, being American is more important to them than being a Zionist. So it's easier to put the Zionism part aside, and they think that, supporting the protest is the American thing to do, or the right thing in that sense to do. So it's easier for them. But I also think that many of them, like myself, truly believe that African Americans in the U.S. are being treated unfairly, and the way they are treated should be changed. And they just support automatically the vehicle that is now advancing that, which is the Black Lives Matter movement, which is where I diverge from them. I think it should be changed. I think the Black Lives Matter movement as an organization is the last body that should be doing that because they are toxic.
Why do you feel that I have to
yeah,
go
let's
down
go.
this road?
Okay.
I have to.
Okay.
Why do you feel that
It's been nice 20 minutes of civil.
No, I'm always civil. I'm never not civil.
Let's fill Ofir in that, like, a few months ago, like when it all began, we had an episode once a month. We do episode, just Eitan and myself, with Chit Chat, and we did an episode and we talked about
monthly recap,
and we talked about whether or not systemic racism exists. And we lost many. We got some hate mail.
I don't think we lost that many.
No,
but someone did message the company I work at and tried to get me fired, which was pretty interesting. Yeah. But anyway, I'm wondering why you think that blacks are treated unfairly
I
in
don't
the US.
think the head of the NYPD is sitting in his office like.
Let's shoot some blacks today.
Yeah, like I don't think that's what happens, but I think a police officer in a problematic situation is more prone to suspect a black individual than a white individual. And I mean, I don't think it's just a crazy thought that I have. If you look at the numbers, more blacks are being shot in these instances than white people, and we need to understand why. Maybe the reason is because they are more involved in these kind of accidents or incidents or whatever you want to call it, and we need to ask ourselves why are African Americans are more likely to be in a situation where they face an armed policeman.
But when we ask ourselves why, we cannot ask ourselves why if we are not able to provide all different explanations, including explanations that are not PC. Okay, we must be able to say that there are some options, some answers.
It's fine.
Okay. I know you're not, but many people are, and that blocks.
Why isn't the answer as simple as like blacks are involved in more crime?
Because because we need to understand why they're involved in more crime. I don't think you could just say because that's the way it is. I think they grow up in certain environments that make them more involved in crime, and we need to understand why. But let me offer a more historic perspective on this.
Okay.
Imagine yourself, as a descendant of people who were it's not forcibly, I mean, it is forcibly, but almost in an inhumane way brought to the other side of the world to be slaves. And let's be honest about it. The United States as a country did not do much to really make it better for them, or to try to do anything to make them feel more welcome.
I think that does this
and for years and until not very long ago, they could not eat in certain restaurants, they could not pee in certain toilets, they could not go on certain buses. And I don't think the United States, the official United States, if you can even call that, did anything to alleviate the pain that it has really caused the Black community. And I had a discussion about this not long ago with someone I really appreciate, and he told me, you know what, if I was an African American, I don't even know if I would be okay speaking English. And when I thought about it, these people have been through humiliation to a degree that, thank God, we can't imagine. And they don't feel like their country did enough to change their situation. So I, as an individual, I don't like affirmative action, and I don't, but I think there are things that could be done. For example, educational programs. For example, I'm not saying, giving them quotas in schools, because I think it's dumb and it would only encourage them not to try as hard, but maybe giving some sort of grants for teachers, better teachers, to go to these schools in heavily Black communities and help the students achieve better grades so they can on their own go to Columbia and not need the quota at Columbia. I think this is something that if the United States does now, maybe in, I hope, 50 or 100 years from now, the situation would look very different. But if the United States does not do anything, and even on a more like softer level, these citizens don't feel equal, and they don't feel like their country is trying to do anything to make them feel like, equal citizens, no matter if it's true or not.
I have a problem in general about, also here in Israel, about deciding things based on what people feel.
I also don't like that. But in the end of the day, it drives people to action. I mean, what people feel drives them to action. It doesn't stay in the realm of feelings. So if, for example, let's bring it home for a second. If an Arab Israeli does not feel like an equal citizen, he is more prone to go outside and stab another Israeli because and no matter if he's right, obviously he's wrong. Obviously, on paper, he's an equal citizen. Obviously, violence is not the way to solve it, even if he wasn't an equal citizen. But the fact is that it puts me in risk if they don't feel like they're equal citizens. I am more at risk walking down the street if they don't feel like an equal citizen.
But that kind of answers to terrorism, because basically if you're saying that if people act out, then we should basically allocate more resources to the parts of society that don't fall in line. Meaning, but not just feel, but who don't, because you're saying thoughts lead to action. And I want to prevent that action, so I should, siphon resources, the money on the people that are thinking or feeling, outcasted.
We need to really make the distinction. Yeah. Terrorism has political aims. Okay, we don't, and there is a difference between an Arab Israeli and, Hamas is a movement who's trying to blackmail Israel to relinquish their territories, that is definitely not something we should do. And, an outside enemy, we should fight like an enemy. But if we can allocate resources to a school in al-Fahim, and the kid in the school in al-Fahim would have a better teacher who would teach him what it means to be a citizen of the state of Israel, and he would understand. I know it sounds really bad, but how lucky he is to be a citizen of the state of Israel and not a citizen of Egypt or Jordan or even our new friends in the Gulf, maybe that could be solved.
But to stay at home, you look, for example, on the numbers of Arabs on universities, and you see that in the past decade, it grew, I think, in either 50 or 100%. I can't recall right now, but something like that, immensely, meaning that they are doing pretty well. And
I know.
And yet, it doesn't help. So even if you do allocate those resources,
it doesn't
it doesn't promise you anything.
I think that today, obviously, I did not do a poll. I don't know it by fact, but I think that today we see many more Arab Israelis integrated into society than we saw 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. I think it does work, and I think they do understand that they have better opportunities here.
Also in America, you see the situation of African Americans improving all the time.
Right, and fortunately for Israel, we don't have so many cases of police brutality against Arab Israelis like the U.S.
Ethiopians would claim that they suffer from the same phenomenon.
Okay, but if you compare the numbers, it's not even.
But the numbers
we're
in the
not
United
there.
States, I'm not sure we're looking at the same numbers. I mean, I wonder what.
I'm not
what is
talking
the,
just about murders or shootings or a fatal shooting.
But if there is such horrific police brutality, wouldn't it express itself at the most extreme levels?
Not always. It could also be more arrests. It could also be, a police officer arresting two, kids robbing a store, and he would beat the crap out of the African American kid and let the white kid go with a warning. I mean, that's also police.
But is there proof to this?
There are people who say it happened to them. I don't go and check each and every one of them, the CCTV to see if it happened or not. But again, I think we need to understand that there is in the United States a collective feeling in the African American community that there is an issue. It's not a matter of
but I'm
one
not sure.
person.
I don't know.
How do we
I
know
was
that?
reading.
At least in New York.
There was
at
a
least in New
poll
York.
recently that it's a shame that I can't quote where this poll is from, but hopefully we'll put a link
An
at the
important
end.
place.
But an important poll, because it's going to sound like I'm pulling a statistic out of my ass, but that recently, I just heard it on the Ben Shapiro podcast, that 80% of African Americans actually want the same amount or more police in their neighborhoods.
Makes sense.
So
I
I don't.
sent you this amazing political video of this nominee in I don't remember,
Detroit.
but in Detroit. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing video.
Something with a K, right? Yeah.
She's running for Congress, and she made an amazing video of herself walking down the street in Detroit and showing how the Democratic mayors of the last 30, 40 years in Detroit really ruined the city and made it one of
And she interviews
the worst
citizens.
Yeah, the worst cities to live in, and there are African Americans in there who, in the video, who are saying, I want more police. But going back, I think New York in that respect is very different than other parts of the United States. I think that New York is more politically active than other parts of the United States. So the protests obviously were larger in New York, but also people are encouraged in New York more to express their opinions. And
But New York
I'm not sure the African American community in New York, or any community in New York for that matter, represents any community at large in the United States.
So, but New York is a great example, because in New York there was, ridiculous amounts of, like, the murder rate was like sky high until they started policing more.
Right.
And they started doing things which aren't so PC, like stop and frisk. And the murder rate dropped
but
like
you understand that
by
there's a
half.
difference between stop and frisk and shooting someone 7 times at the back.
No,
Okay.
of
When he's
course.
walking away.
So let's talk about
Let's talk about it.
I'm not
That's-
saying we
that's
shouldn't. I think more policing is good, but the question is also, how do you police? And if you police, if you take the same actions against a white detainee that you take against a black detainee, I think.
I don't think there's any proof, though. I mean, there's a great study also by John Werther of Harvard University, who actually said if you account for crime, that white people have a higher likelihood
Really?
of being shot by police than he's black, by the way. So it's not like he has, I don't know, some
White
suspicion
supremacist,
of
think
but
center.
I'm not sure there's evidence that black Americans, and that's what I really
Again,
am
it
worried
goes
about.
back to the fact that this is how the community feels. It's
That's
not
that's the
just
problem.
about facts.
But I'm not even sure that the community feels that way. I wonder if
I think the
wonder
community in
if-
New York does. I don't know.
I wonder if
in
the
other
community in Colombia does.
Yes.
And I wonder what percentage of that community is, first of all, black, and how well connected they are to the black population in the United States. Because I'm not sure, like, I don't think that BLM was hijacked. I think BLM hijacked blacks.
That's what I'm saying. the movement hijacked the cause, not people hijacked the movement.
But I don't think most Black Americans think to themselves, "I'm being unfairly mistreated." Like,
By
I don't
the
think
system.
I don't think most Black Americans think that I have a danger. Like, my number one problem is I'm gonna be.
I don't think it's their
like-
number one problem. I think they're, in their minds, I think, I don't know. Their number one problem is not being able to find a job, or, can't pay rent or stuff like that. And it has to do with opportunities that they feel like they're not getting.
Yeah.
It's not just a matter of police.
Before we get to when you talked about the history of the African Americans and what they suffered, like you told us, imagine what they have been through. So I was thinking to myself, you don't need to go so far. Like, I can imagine how it feels like when your entire family is murdered and you left by
Right.
yourself, and then you go to a country where you don't.
The only issue is
No.
you're not living in Germany. speaking
Right, that's
German,
it.
and-
So
But
You're
yeah,
not-
there are
you have-
Jews
but
living
it's
in
more-
Germany.
First of all, there was anti-Semitism in the 40s and 50s.
You don't live in Germany that doesn't want to repent its actions.
Okay, but you start,
But-
starting from
The
zero.
official United States does not want to admit that it was wrong.
So I think that does injustice to the amount that America has done to abolish slavery. And I know that sounds probably ridiculous to many
It
people
is.
today because they've been fed so much. But the U.S., I think I mean, if you look at the history of the United States, earlier than almost anywhere, they started putting in place legislation that started getting rid of slavery
Okay,
early,
but the
early,
fact
early on.
is that
and
they
fought
were
and died.
one of the last countries in the world to get rid of discriminatory laws, like the Jim Crow laws. Like, I mean, it lasted until not very long ago.
Yeah, but I'm saying the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are like within them contain
Right,
the
but
seed
it doesn't
that
matter
abolished.
Right, but it doesn't matter if on the ground people are still slaves.
But people weren't. I mean, early on, already in like the beginning of the 19th century, in 1800s,
But not everywhere.
where everywhere in the world there were slaves. In the U.S. there were free states. There were places where
Yeah,
blacks
but-
could live. Oh, there was even blacks who
But the
owned slaves.
most
by
of the
way.
black population was in the South, where they were still
And
enslaved.
that's why they went to fight. And
Right.
many people, white people died, and black people died for that.
But don't you? I guess my question is, don't you think that like dealing with the past of either slavery, which is 100 and over 150 years ago, actually almost over 150 years ago, or with Jim Crow, which was also abolished 50 years ago, over
not that long
60,
ago.
70 years ago.
It's not that long ago.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that long ago.
But it's gone.
But it's gone.
been
It's in
and
the past.
It's in the past.
There's
When
no
Israel
black.
did everything in its power to bring Jews from Yemen here,
Yeah.
black Americans could still not eat at a diner with white
In the South.
in the
In
South.
the South, yeah. No, but a lot of these blacks are protesting in New York, in
It doesn't matter where
in
they're
Minnesota, which was free since the Northwestern
Yeah, but
Ordinance,
that's
which was in like
exactly-
1800.
But that's exactly the point, because they're protesting not as individuals who suffered. I, as an individual, suffered under Jim Crow, and now I'm protesting. They're protesting as a community because they feel they are collectively mistreated, not individually mistreated. Also individually,
So
but the problem is the collective mistreatment.
So
of
I'm
African
wondering
Americans.
again to my question. Don't you feel it's like لخبوش بعفار, how do you like to just dig into
Dwell,
dwell on the past too much instead of? Shouldn't there be leaders in the black community that are urging
Maybe, but
young
I'm not black.
men
It's
to?
not my role
there
to
are
say.
like that woman.
Why? Okay, so that's a
Because-
good point. Why is it not your place
Because
to say
I was
that? Is
not
there
there.
something essentially different about a black
Okay,
person?
let me say it this way, okay?
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about me because I'm not black. I don't know how they feel, okay? I to
You
this
said
day-
you weren't PC. There's nothing that
Okay.
because they're black it makes them feel different.
I to this day don't buy German products.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
we live in 2020,
Yeah.
and to this day I would not buy any item that was produced in Germany or
Would you fly connection?
no.
Okay.
You reminded me
No.
of heard an interview with what's her
It's
name?
it's a touchy point because I had to pay $1,000 extra not to fly through Vienna.
Wow.
Which
and
is not Germany, by the way.
Germany and Austria is the same for me.
There's an Israeli journalist. Channel 20. Elinor something. What's her name?
Eric Lino.
Eric Lino, who apparently has a book and she refuses to translate it to German.
And I get it. To this day, I don't buy anything German, and I don't want any German to come and tell me, you know what, it's been so long ago. Like, you should totally get over it. Like, you shouldn't dwell on the past. It's just, it's gone.
Which
it's
they
2020,
say, by the
right?
way.
And I don't accept that argument. It's my grief, and I will decide how I cope with it.
But that's the perfect example. Again, I come back to the Jewish example. And if you look at the U.S., the same American Jews, because you still I don't know, have an I forgot the word, but you're still angry with the Germans, right? But you took your fate in your own hands and you built yourself a life. And
Right.
And the
I
Jews in
100%
America who came in the
100%.
40s and 50s, they suffered from anti-Semitism, from
Wait.
systemic the Hollywood, many of them were socialists. They were hunted down by people by the FBI and the CIA, or the CIA mainly, okay, and suffered. You had in the campuses, you had, right, Jews couldn't, I don't know until when it lasted, but Jews couldn't, there were
quotas and couldn't get into golf clubs
in
and
universities.
stuff like. But that's exactly the thing. I think I was
So-
misunderstood. I'm not saying the African American community should just sit at home, not look for jobs and protest all day long. That's not what I'm saying. I think they should take active measures to improve their situation. But at the same time, it's their decision to make if the United States has done enough or not to, try and make them feel like equal citizens. It's not my decision to make, it's theirs. And at the same time, they should be actively trying to improve their lives. They at the same time have every right to say, you know what, we don't feel like you did enough.
But there is nothing in the United States today that discriminates against a black man. Is just as equal as a white man. So
True.
So what?
There is nothing in Germany today that mass murders Jews. I still don't buy any German product.
I'm not sure.
Mass murder?
No, they're not committing genocide.
No, they're not committing
Unless
it.
you know something. that
But
we don't.
they're not committing it. But the mindset and the basic anti-Semitism
Okay, so
is
the
still.
African American
you're-
community can argue the same. That
But then
there
you're getting
is
into
systemic
the, yeah.
racism in the U.S. and in their minds, there
They
are
don't
still
have-
active KKK cells in the United States.
You can't argue with feelings, but I think it's a bit unfair to compare the United States' history with the black community with Nazi Germany.
No. It's
That's
definitely
my
not.
fault.
It's definitely not the same thing.
Yeah, I should have directed at you.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same thing. Definitely no comparison there. I think the Holocaust is the most horrible tragedy in human history, and I don't think it can be compared to anything.
If we go back to the viral video from several days ago,
Jacob Blake.
So I think it's a perfect example because, okay, the video goes out, right, to the web, to the interwebs,
Yeah.
and we only have this video. We don't know what happened before. We don't know what happened after.
Yeah.
We don't know even what
That's
happened.
why I described it as it looks bad.
Yeah, I mean, it
I don't know if
always
it's bad.
looks bad when someone's getting killed.
Well, he's not killed.
Yeah, that's
He
that's
actually
true.
survived that.
It
Is
just
he
goes
still?
to show. Yeah. He's
I heard he's fighting for his life.
Yeah.
no. I heard he's.
Well, he's not going to be able to
walk.
To walk.
But
any-
he's in
He's
sustainable
stable,
yeah,
yeah.
stable condition. Okay.
So it goes out. Nobody knows, but already, everybody's like got an opinion, and of course the riots begin and the violence begins.
Well,
and
surprisingly,
they fire
the
the
riots
policeman.
only and the protests are only limited to Wisconsin, which is very surprising. I thought it would flare up to a much bigger thing, especially after.
still have time.
Well, yeah, but I thought after Breonna Taylor and and it would flare up to something way larger than just staying in Wisconsin.
But I think it goes to the point of that you were making about feelings, about we're focusing too much on instead of, I don't know, thinking about facts and, what's the reality.
That
It's
I
like
agree.
today everybody can
No,
feel a different way. And I mean, I don't know. You look at what happened with George Floyd and there was just new footage. I don't know if you saw this, but
No, I haven't.
there was just new footage that came out recently that he, before what I thought was the most, I mean, it's leading up to the point where he's on the ground.
I saw that. It's like he's walking out of the store and...
No, it's from his car. They walk up to the car and they pull him out. It's horrific. I mean, it's horrific to watch any of these things, and I think that goes without saying, but has to be said today. That it's not like anybody
You don't get a kick out of it.
Yeah, nobody wants to see someone killed. It's not. But anyway, you see that beforehand he was yelling, "I'm gonna die! I'm gonna die!" Before they even got him on the floor. Like he was sitting in the car and he was yelling, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. And that seems like super critical to assessing the situation, because it means that when he's on the ground, all of a sudden there's a completely different context to him saying, I can't breathe, I'm gonna die.
Okay, I think that's, avoiding responsibility. I mean, a police officer should be trained to understand when he's killing a human being. You shouldn't have to tell him, hey,
Yeah.
I can't breathe. Like if he pressures your neck for 6 minutes.
You don't think that that's important that if someone was
No.
acting unreasonably before and saying things like,
It doesn't justify killing him.
it doesn't justify, but it gives a different context.
It gives a context that doesn't matter. He ended up being killed.
Exactly,
It doesn't
but there's
matter
a
how he
difference
acted
between
before.
killing
He
and
shouldn't be killed.
no, but that's what I'm saying. That there's a difference between killing and cold-blooded murder. Meaning, you get what I'm saying. So there's gradations here, and like maybe Derek Chauvin committed third-degree manslaughter or second-degree manslaughter.
Yeah, but you can also cold blood murder someone who is acting crazy. I mean, the fact that he acted crazy does not make it less cruel.
I'm saying you can do anything. Can
But
be
I
true.
I would totally agree with you that we need more context and not just like these 20-second clips. But unfortunately, we don't get that.
There's a point I gotta ask you about. Do you consider yourself white privileged?
No.
Are Jews white?
I
Jews
don't consider myself white.
Is
first of all.
anybody
Let's
white
start with
privileged?
it. I assume some people are. I don't know.
Are Jews white?
No.
And are Jews
definitely
American
not.
Jews? Are they white and
No.
are they privileged?
They are white passing. Oh my god, I can't believe I'm using these terms.
What does it mean?
That they could appear to other people as white. Like they could be mistakenly identified as white and
Unless you're
treated as such.
skin color blind. Which is a
No,
rare-
Jews are definitely not white. I don't think there is even, I mean, there is disagreement on that, but definitely Jews are not white.
Have you
Jews
been
are-
called white privileged?
Yes, I've been called many things, including a Nazi, but that's
Besides the
irrelevant.
point. Oh, yeah.
I've
Join the
been-
club.
I've
You know?
been called everything on Columbia's campus that could make me look bad. But I mean, I don't think anyone. I mean, they try to, but I don't think it's disputable. I mean, Jews are not white. Jews are their own race. Just as you have blacks and you have whites and you have, I don't know, Russians and you have Asians, you have Jews.
And privileged.
But you don't have it on. By the way, I was going through a process. Anyway. You don't have the nationality of Jewish on certain diversity forms in different companies.
Right. So for Colombia, for example, when they ask for your ethnicity, I always add the other and then write Jewish.
You had other?
There was other.
Yeah, so I
But you
just
feel
click
like-
other and
yeah.
add Jewish.
Yeah. But it's not
because I'm
like-
not white, I'm not
Yeah.
black, I'm not Arab.
Sometimes
I am
I feel
Jewish.
like putting the African American one because I'm more African American than most African Americans. I was my father was born in Casablanca. My mother's side of the family is Moroccan, so I'm like 3/4 African,
And you are an American citizen.
and I'm an American.
You're also
So I
Asian.
could technically put African American,
Also
but I
Asian.
feel like I might come across as a little bit of like Elizabeth Warren. So I don't know if I want
A
to
little bit.
do that.
I think we're all Asians.
Well, you are more African than Elizabeth Warren is.
Yeah.
Cherokee. So
I'm probably
you're good.
more Indian than she is to the Native American than she
I'm
is.
more Indian.
Okay, and privileged? American Jews, would you say they're privileged?
I mean, I don't like to categorize whole groups of people as privileged
Yeah.
or not. Some people were born in very nice families and they had the privilege of having very easy lives. So yeah, they're privileged. Some did not. So they're not. I don't think you can collectively say the American Jewish community is privileged or not. I don't think any community is collectively privileged or not. Even if you're, you know what, I'll take it even further. Even if you're a male Christian white American does not and rich does not automatically make you privileged. You might have, you know, a really hard life and I don't know, you're an orphan or something like that. You're
Maybe
not
super
privileged.
ugly and fat. And then like life
Like
sucks for you.
any struggle in
Seriously,
life. I don't know.
Right?
I just don't like categorizing people as privileged or not. I think that, you know, I'm gonna sound super like liberal right now, but I think everyone, you know, has their struggles, and I think just categorizing a group of people as privileged and treating them as such and not, you know, looking at the individual and seeing, you know, what's their situation is
I have to say
like
there's
a horrible thing.
There's a bit of like some like a contradiction, like a paradox when I talking to you, because on one hand I feel like we've had you on the podcast before. We talked a lot about SSI, and like on one hand it feels like you are probably the least scared of PC and like the backlash of like saying non-PC stuff. But on the other hand, I get the sense that you've been almost like somewhat indoctrinated
No.
by American academia.
I don't mind being not PC. That's completely fine. I really think that you know, in some issues we need to understand the reality, and we need to look at how, you know, certain communities experience certain things. That does, like, not being afraid to not be PC doesn't mean that I always have to not be PC. There are certain things that, you know, they happen to be PC, but they also happen to be what I think. So
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
So you're here till
January,
till January.
as of right now, because everything is online.
How
It's
many
tough.
semesters are?
So I'm just starting my master's at Columbia this coming Monday. So
Cool.
2 more years. But
What are you studying? I don't think we ever asked.
So I'm doing my bachelor's in international relations and then my master's in international security policy.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I'm gonna be a mean person selling guns. I don't know.
Oh yeah, arms dealer.
Maybe. I
Why
don't know.
guns?
We'll
Join
see.
NSO and sell our intelligence secrets to
We'll
Arab
talk about
countries.
it. I actually know the person who does your PR.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I'll join.
And have you visited Temple Mount and stuff?
Yeah.
Ofir is an
I
avid
saw a
Temple
picture.
Mount advocate.
Yeah, actually, I had a bit of a clash with the police there. I don't know if your listeners are aware, but there are very crazy protocols when it comes to Jewish rights in the
Dystopian.
Temple Mount.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's not even like, you know, coded in any rulings or something. It's just very random. Like the police officer can on the spot decide, you know, what he or she wants to enforce or not, or not even enforce because it's not a rule. They can just, you know, for the top from their head, you know, just decide what they want to do. So I've been scolded for singing Israel's national anthem, Tikva, at the Temple Mount because apparently that's forbidden.
You're not allowed to
harms the
say any Jewish
feelings.
prayers on the Temple Mount, right?
Right.
You might harm the feelings of the.
Yeah. See, I'm going back
Yeah.
to feelings. Again. When you say I was indoctrinated, just kidding. Yeah, but it's pretty insane. Like, you know, it's insane. Just imagine that.
It is.
You know,
crazy.
you're in the center of Israel's capital and you're being scolded by an Israeli police wearing a patch with the Israeli flag for singing the national anthem. It's just insane.
Yeah. It's weird because, you know, I'm Jewish. I live in Israel. I've never been to the Temple Mount.
You should.
Never.
Let's go.
But it just goes to show the kind of restrictions.
But it's not just the restrictions.
I don't know what I have
think.
to look for there.
Okay, but that's exactly the thing. I think you know, it's a sharp move, but the Israeli education system works, you know, extra time hiding this place from people. I mean, I grew up 12 years in a secular education system. I have never heard the two words Temple Mount. I think we are brought up to believe that, you know, the Western Wall is good enough.
Close enough.
It's close enough, and in reality it's not. You know, it's just a supportive wall that had nothing to do with the temple. But they say, you know, it's good enough, don't piss off the Arabs, you know, just go there and, you know, stick your little notes in the cracks.
Ariel Sharon started the second Intifada,
and just
right?
like go there, you know, right? And that's exactly the thing, because they worked extra time in, you know, trying to raise us to believe that this is, you know, what we should be praying towards, when in reality it's really not. And Jews are allowed to ascend the Temple Mount, and only when a mass amount of Jews understand that they are allowed to do that, we will start to be able to demand our rights there. Because when it's a group of crazy people like me, you know, when we're like a few, I don't know, like 200, 300 people, like we can't really demand anything.
Yeah. Although you don't, like, you're not the stereotype
No,
of a
I'm
crazy person who goes to this Temple Mount.
Well, yeah.
You don't have enough sleeves right now.
I don't have enough sleeves right now. That's very true. Or never, apparently. And that's also a thing, by the way. Last time I was there, I was wearing a shirt that like covered my shoulders. Like, I don't know. And all of a sudden they were like, the Israeli police, not even the Jordanian Waqf, the Israeli police, before we even ascended, they were like, oh, you should cover. And I'm like, no, I've been here many times with like short sleeves. And my shoulders are covered. I'm definitely not covering up. We ascended, and the Waqf didn't even mention it. I mean, the Israeli police became
More
stricter.
saints than the Pope.
Right. They became stricter than the Waqf, which is insane. It's insane. We have this mentality, I'm sorry, but like it's crazy. We have the mentality of you know, the Israeli police is used to being bossed around by the Waqf for so long that they just we're like becoming stricter.
They're like, we're having a good day. Don't ruin it for us.
Exactly. And I refused, and nobody like said anything, and I ended up like not covering, well, nothing, because nothing was exposed.
You went in nude.
Yeah, like my elbows were showing.
Thank you.
Okay, so what can we plug before we go? Like you're on social media.
Okay, so Twitter, Ofir Dayan 94.
Yes.
Ofir, you spell it with
Ofir Dayan 94. On Instagram, it's Ofir Dayan 1994, and on Facebook, it's just Ofir Dayan. But most importantly, Students Supporting Israel at Columbia University, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
You accept donations to the students?
Of course. So we accept donation through the Student Supporting Israel national website. You can just type in Student Supporting Israel, and we're very clear about it. There's a huge red button say donate. Okay. So just click
Not
it.
Shy.
Not shy.
We
don't have a big red button, but we also...
Where do you get those buttons?
You just buy them at the donation store. Like, you go there and they're like, oh, how much money do you want to get?
The size of the button. You're going to need a big button.
Yeah. Okay, so before we go, we have a new collaboration, a new sponsorship.
Yes. We are sponsored by The Forward. We're really proud to tell you guys we're sponsored by The Forward at forward.com.
Yeah.
You can go to forward.com/TNJB.
It's going to change soon, hopefully, to 2NJB.
But this time go to TNJB. You don't want to miss it, because you get a super, super special discount. Instead of paying $60 a year, you get 6 months for $10. So check them out. Yeah, it's a great subscription. Forward.com/TNJB.
Or 2NJB, depending
2NJB.
on where you listen to this.
Yeah.
And also subscribe to their newsletter, because that's how you can get news flashes also about our new episodes. Also, Arutz Sheva.
IsraelNationalNews.com.
Yes.
Check them out. IsraelNationalNews.com.
They're nice. I used to write for them.
Yes,
Really?
they're very nice.
Cool.
They're very cool. They put our episodes in their websites, and we're glad to work with them. So check them out. Highly recommended content in English about Israel. Also, ajn.timesofisrael.com, the Australian Jewish news. Check them out if you want to stay updated.
Yes.
On things that have to do with Australia
and Jews.
and Jews.
And, of course, we do this on our free time, so go click that big donate button at
it's pretty
2njb.com/donate. Yeah, it's not that big, but look for it. Spend
Yeah.
the time. It's worth it because we really need it. Help
Yeah.
us out. Thank you. 2njb.com/donate.
And that is it. Ofir, תודה רבה. Thank you.
תודה רבה.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
guys.
Be here again.
Bye.
Bye, guys.